women are courageous in so many often unsung ways. So courage in Dubai, though it won't be easy, will be simple. Because what a privileged position the women attending are in. So I asked them to take advantage of it and be brave enough to speak up for all those who have so little now and in the future, and to be peaceful warriors who safeguard the children.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Climate Emergency Forum. I'm your host, Regina Valdez, and today we'll be discussing what's up at COP28. And that's right, a lot of you are aware that we are coming close to the time to the UNFCCC, that is the United Nations Framework Conference on Climate Change, the COP, the Conference of Parties. This will be the 28th COP, and this year, COP will take place in Dubai. Now, a lot of people wonder, why did last year's COP take place in Egypt? Why is this year's taking place in Dubai? It's not because the delegates want to travel to exotic locales. It's very important to have these conferences in different parts of the world to allow other people in various regions to attend who might not be able to attend. Another very important aspect is that I mentioned that last year the conference was in Egypt, and this year it's going to be in the Middle East in Dubai. And this is, of course, very important because this encompasses the MENA region, MENA, which of course stands for the Middle East and North Africa. So these are very important regions, and it's very important that they're included in the COP because it's predicted that many portions of this region will become uninhabitable. It will be too hot for people to work outside. It will be too hot for many crops to grow. And of course, there's always the issue of water. And so, as we know, with higher heat, higher temperatures, we have greater degree of evaporation. And of course, that means less water. And then, of course, heavier downpours. So the MENA region is critical. It's absolutely critical that they find ways to mitigate, but especially adapt. They're going to have to adapt to the coming changes that will be very extreme in their climate. Now, the first Conference of Parties was in Berlin in 1995. And this was the first summit, and there were countries around the world that officially agreed, yes, we will meet every year to discuss climate change. We will meet every year to discuss limiting emissions and how we will go about doing that. Well, they have met every year. I think with the exception of 1 year, that was the first year of COVID. Aside from that, it's been every year. Even COP26, which was in Glasgow, it was still during the time of COVID, but we all had vaccinations. By then, we all knew how transmission was. So it's been an annual event. One of the big goals was to keep the average mean temperature of the globe below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Those of you who have been watching our show, those of you who are familiar with Dr. James Hansen and his work, know that that is dead in the water. So that is, we are going to overshoot 1.5. Still, it is very important that countries continue to meet. One of the very important agreements that was manifested from a various COP, and it's an early one, was the Kyoto Protocol. That was the third COP that was in Kyoto. And the Kyoto Protocol was this promise to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the industrialized nations. It also helped to establish the foundation of a carbon market. So there have been many different COPs, many different outcomes. Many people say it's not enough. We can't agree any more than that. Of course, it's not enough. The only thing that would be enough would be to keep fossil fuels on the ground. However, you have to be in it to win it. You can't just sit it out and just say, you know what, forget it. It's all just a bunch of bull. I don't want anything to do with it. We need to keep their feet to the fire. We need to have a presence and to make that presence known. Now, we have a very special guest today. That's Julie Johnston, and I'm going to turn it over to her. And we always love it when you're on the show, Julie. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Regina. What I want to share today about the COP is something that's completely unscientific. This is something that I've been writing. It's an invitation I've been making for the past 14 years now, ever since the Copenhagen COP. And it's a heartfelt request to all the women who are going to attend the COP in Dubai this year. So I send it out to all the women, grandmothers, mothers, daughters, sisters, aunties, nieces, cousins, godmothers, wives, partners, and girlfriends who are going to attend the climate talks in the United Arab Emirates. And the first thing that I ask of women going is that they please wear bright colors. Please inject some life into the talks. Wear the colors of flowers and forests and sunsets and fresh fruit and children's smiles. Another thing that I ask is that they be a mother or a grandmother first and believe in their power. The powers that be need to hear that all the mothers of the world want what's best for the children of all species. So I ask them to please represent all the mothers and grandmothers around the globe. And even if women don't have their own biological or adopted children, they are still a mother to all the children everywhere. And so I ask them to speak up for the children. I want them to remember that climate change knows no borders. So try to forget that they're in Dubai representing their own country. Just think of the planet as one nation and one biosphere and one shared home within one shared atmosphere that knows no boundaries. So I ask all women attending the COP to speak for all human beings as well as the rest of nature, which has no seat and no voice at the talks unless you represent them there. I also ask that compassion be their compass. Remember that prosperity and a thriving economy are impossible if the natural environment is ailing. So we must get our priorities right. And if a decision doesn't have the earth and the children's future at heart, then that decision is not a compassionate one and not a viable one. I ask all the women of the world to call for zero carbon, along with some more urgency in achieving it. I ask them to try and rev up the imaginations of world leaders and negotiators of all ilks, even the heartless, uncreative ones. And I help them to envision the golden age of whatever it's going to take. I used to say renewable energy. Now I don't even know anymore. We just have to quickly do something. And I suggest that they let courage guide them. Women are courageous in so many often unsung ways. So courage in Dubai, though it won't be easy, will be simple. What a privileged position the women attending are in. So I ask them to take advantage of it and be brave enough to speak up for all those who have so little now and in the future, and to be peaceful warriors who safeguard the children. So be willing to stand up, join arms, and say no or yes, if the case may be. Call for an end to fossil fuel subsidies. And remember the great women who have already demonstrated their courage. And I think of women like Rachel Carson, Jane Goodall, Diane Fossey, Birute Galdikas, the orangutan woman researcher, Patricia Wright, Danella Meadows, Berta Katseris, Hazel Henderson, Sylvia Earle, Erin Brockovich, Sister Dorothy Stang, Chai Jing in China, Severn Cullis Suzuki here in Canada, Lois Gibbs, the women of the Chipko movement in India, Beatrix Potter, Greta Thunberg, and other young activists, Wangari Maathai, Julia Butterfly Hill, Betty Kratchik, right near us, Vandana Shiva, Sheila Watt-Cloutier in the Arctic, Hildegard of Bingen, Harriet Nahani, stand on their shoulders and be climate heroes in Dubai. That's what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Julie. That was so inspiring. And what you had to share reminded me of a quote by the former Irish president and UN Rights Commissioner, Mary Robinson. She said that climate change is a man-made problem with a feminist solution. And I absolutely love that. And of course, men in the audience, before you get upset, she makes it very clear, and we should all understand that feminism does not mean excluding men. It means just simply including women. So I think that is a very important point that you make, Julie, and I very much appreciate it. So Peter, I would love to hear what you have to say after that.
Thanks, Regina, and thanks, Julie, for that I really enjoyed that presentation. Thank you very much. So, as I sort of try and do when all the COPs come up and before the COPs, I went and researched, okay, what are the positions going to be? What are the governments saying? And so I checked out again the last meeting of the G20, because obviously they're going to have the most influence, I guess, unfortunately, but there we are. And I also checked out the position of the EU, which normally is the best one. So I thought that would be useful. Now it's quite amazing. After decades, really for the first time, all of the positions acknowledge what the IPCC 6 assessment said what they have to do. They've never done this before. They've acknowledged it in specific terms, the G20 and the EU, that emissions had to go into decline in 2020. Yeah, they have that in writing on their positions. And if not that, well, not that, of course, at least by 2025. So they've all agreed on that. It's absolutely amazing. And it is a very positive thing because it gives the people who are going to rally for some result out of COP28 a lever to use, if I can put it like that. And they also have in writing that emissions have to decline 45% by 2030, 60% by 2035. They have it all down. So I mean, I really am quite shocked that they've done this for the first time. So let's be positive. So of course, everything is based on 1.5 degrees C, which is insanely positive. So well done. And so they've acknowledged what they have to do. But of course, when you read the language, they seem to be trying to find some way out of not doing it as usual. Unfortunately, the bad thing that's happened is the phony abatement of fossil fuels. So what they've been saying is that, and of course the fossil fuel corporations and the fossil fuel producers are all behind this. So they want to be able to say that they're going to do something with fossil fuels and sort of not do it. And they found the way is to say we are going to phase out, and they do have phase out this time, unabated fossil fuels. So what the heck does unabated mean? Well, it means that fossil fuels that don't have carbon capture and storage fitted into them. So that's insanely positive too. So good luck with that. But what really has disappointed me is that the EU has come online with this. So although they all agreed with the IPCC with what they have to do, they've now all agreed, unfortunately, with the lousy way out of avoiding doing it. The positive way to look at this is that, well, they can't abate for at least 20 or 30 years. So there's a good reason for the activists to say, okay, you said you're going to reduce fossil fuels, close down coal plants and not burn any more carbon. And you say unabated, well, fine, you're not going to be able to abate it for 30 years. So you've got to close down the plants. So that would be the approach to make with that. It would be quite a tussle and a hustle. The other thing is that, as I say, they have all agreed specifically, and even the EU, that the technologies, they pretend they're saying that the technologies to remove carbon are available and we can do it. So that's that's the big challenge for the activists at COP28.
Thank you so much. The idea of carbon capture, it's great in theory, but we're nowhere near it. And in terms of cost, we're nowhere near it. And in terms of time, we need something right away. Paul, can you share with us your thoughts on the Conference of Parties and anything related to what either Peter or Julie just shared?
Thank you. So one of the main issues that I see with the COPs is that it's almost like two conferences. One conference is the NGOs, the citizens, the scientists, and that includes sort of the trade show, if you like, the country booths, etc. So there's lots to see and lots to do, and it's impossible for any one person to capture everything that's there. But it's a great place to collect information. But then the other conference is the government policymakers and negotiators and heads of state, et cetera. And they're very, very isolated. I don't see very much connection among the two. It would be nice to see some mechanism to bring those two isolated conferences, if you like, together. COP's been going on for a long time. It's an institution run by the United Nations, and it's supposed to take the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change information as the source of a lot of the climate stuff. And, over time, it's grown larger and larger. In fact, I don't know if this year will set a record in attendance wise, but I've seen numbers as high as 70,000 people. Maybe some people will stay away, it won't be that big. But it's a bit unwieldy and cumbersome to keep growing every year. I guess my biggest issue is, from what I've seen in the pre-COP media and news, even directly from the UN, people are still talking about the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, as well as the 2 degrees Celsius target. But the 1.5 in particular, a report just was released today. There's a flurry of reports in the weeks before the COP, and there was a report just today on the nationally determined contributions, the NDCs of different countries to hold the temperature to 1.5. If you just look at the temperature month to month in 2023, we're going to be at 1.54 degrees Celsius. And that's above the 1880 to 1920 baseline. And I have to remind people that the original baselines for that 1.5 and 2 degrees was the 1750 year, as defined as pre-industrial revolution. And that you need to add 0.2 or 0.3 to all those temperatures. So it's even well above 1.5 if you talk about the original baseline. James Hansen, his landmark paper, Global Warming in the Pipeline, is full of information about how quickly our planet is warming right now and the reasons why. And we're actually, I said we're at 1.5 now. By 2030, James Hansen and his colleagues think we'll be about halfway to 2, maybe 1.71 is his number in his most recent letter. And we'll be at 2 degrees Celsius by 2038. That's with the present rates of growth. So I think, and one of the reasons is the International Maritime Organization has been reducing sulfur in shipping fuels. So these are the most important things, and I hope that they're talked about by the negotiators and by both of the two conferences that I mentioned, but I don't see them as part of the negotiations right now. So it's another inadvertent Faustian bargain, the idea that some president of the International Maritime Organization can say in 2015, we're going to really restrict sulfur to save on air pollution deaths, and then ratchet it up even tighter in 2020. And it seems that temperatures have greatly accelerated since then. There's also the methane levels. One of the top methane people, Ewan Nisbet, says we might be in a termination zero methane event. In other words, the methane could skyrocket over the next few decades. The COP needs to stick to the real reality of the climate science. And, there's good things. It brings world focus on climate, at least for several weeks. And King Charles is going to be opening it. The Pope is going to be there early. Biden and Xi, the US-China leaders, are meeting in a week. Hopefully they end up going to the conference. It's not clear. We also need the negotiators to talk about carbon dioxide removal and solar radiation management and things like that, because we're already, I'm just wondering how long it will take for government to say, yeah, we've hit 1.5. I think they're going to argue that we need to be at 1.5 for 30 years was one of the arguments I saw, which is totally absurd when you think about it. So anyway, it's quite an affair. I hope every year that some good things come out of it, but don't have your expectations too high, I guess, is my main point.
I think that's a fair point, Paul. It's a very important event. Last year was also quite important, as losses and damages was on the docket. And there was a lot of discussion regarding reparations and what the wealthier nations who have done much to create this climate crisis, what they owe the poorer countries. Of course, Pakistan was very much on everyone's minds due to the recent floods. I mean, it was just tremendous. So yes, there was an amount that was agreed upon. I don't remember exactly what that amount was, but a lot of people thought it was too little too late. And then in the end, when you looked at how much really the wealthier nations were giving to the poorer nations, which are disproportionately affected by climate change, it's just not enough. It's just not enough. So while we meet every year and we want important goals, we know 1.5 is no longer alive. We know that waiting is only going to lead to even more disaster. And of course, this is very unfair to a majority of the living beings on the planet. And of course, I'm not just speaking about Homo sapiens. Julie, I really found what you discussed about the women who are going to be attending COP, that they attend as mothers and grandmothers and really life givers. I think that is an incredibly important thing to focus on. And I'm just wondering if you have anything else for us to think about.
So a couple of things. One is I should mention that when I'm talking about the men and women going to COP28, I'm also including in my thoughts our friends beyond the binary. So I hope that people know that. I should mention that after many years, I realized that I hadn't said very much about the men going to COP. And so if you don't mind, I'll share quickly what I wrote for the men. One of the things I said for the men is to show off their ecological smarts. So during the negotiations, remember that we're facing some people sooner than others of us, a threat to our very existence. Our lives and our livelihoods, our food security and water sources, our homes, and for some, their entire homelands are threatened by this climate emergency and this enemy of our own making and this foe with no face. So I'm asking the men to share their ecological literacy and their understanding of the importance of biodiversity, and to call others on their eco-illiteracy and their lunacy or lack of logic. And I would also say to admit what they don't understand, to not be afraid to pose questions, especially the stupid ones, because many of us are thankful for those once they're posed, and to name evil where they witness it. We can't eat coal, we can't drink oil, we can't breathe natural gas. It's neither money nor the burning of fossil fuels that gives us life. And I think a lot of people forget that. They merely give us ease. So speak up for the true necessities of life. The other thing I want to say quickly is that 2/3 of the 250,000 meals served this year at the COP are going to be vegan or vegetarian. And that's pretty exciting. They're calling it 1.5 aligned menu. So, oopsies. But I want to shout out to Youngo, the Youth and Children constituency of the UNFCCC, and Food at COP, which is they put together a campaign dedicated to ensuring COP events have climate-friendly catering. So there's that. That's a win. And maybe next year it'll be 100% vegan. That would be exciting.
Thank you, Julie. I love that idea. We should absolutely align with our principles. No shade to people who are not vegan or vegetarian.
Nobody ever died from not eating meat at a climate conference, right?
Thank you. This is very true. Yeah. No one ever died from that. And who knows, they may have lengthened their lives. So it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Peter, what are your thoughts?
So when you read through the positions, what the government leaders and the G20 and the EU say they're going to do, even myself, I forget what's at stake here. And what's at stake here, and it's been at stake for many, many years, is our entire future. Already, as Paul has just said, on the Hansen paper and others as well, the idea of still being able to limit to 1.5 degrees is absurd. It's an absurd deception. And when I read through these documents, the whole thing is a massive, massive deception. The deception of all time, really, I would say. Because the reality is that because we're going to go over 1.5 degrees C, all the children in the world, everywhere, are going to be left with one hell of a planet Earth. And that is the reality. And that is what the science says. And as I say, I tend to forget about this when I read through this stuff. And it's a deception that leads to absolute absurdity. I'm going to read a couple of lines to you from the G20, what they say their position is on climate change and the negotiations. We recall and reaffirm the $100 billion climate fund to address the needs of the developing nations by year 2020. They're reaffirming in 2023 that they promised to do this in 2020. They say they're going to do this through 2025. So absolutely absurd. What is even more absurd is, of course, it's already been mentioned that, and I should say here, everybody says there's no silver bullet, and that's very sensible. But actually there is. When the governments of the world are subsidizing the fossil fuel industry to the tune of $7 trillion a year, that's a silver bullet. Take that away, and we've got a future again. That really has to be, I think, the attention, the focus of all the activists and everybody. On fossil fuel subsidies, here's what the G20 said. We will increase our efforts of 2009 in the Pittsburgh G20 summit to phase out, now they say, inefficient fossil fuel subsidies. Can you imagine this? In this position document, they say, we promised to stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry in 2009. So it's a massive, massive deception is what it is. And unfortunately, I guess probably most of the population will be taken in by this, because not everybody in the world spends the time that we all spend on keeping up with the climate change science and the climate change views. They should be ashamed of themselves. These leaders should be absolutely ashamed of themselves because they know what's at stake and they have children in their lives. So how bad can a person get? Wow.
Thank you so much, Peter, for bringing up the future of our world, the future of our species who are shortchanging. Of course, if we cared about lives, we would stop the burning of fossil fuels immediately, which costs 10 million people their lives annually, every year. We saw the world respond to COVID-19, and it didn't take as many lives as are lost every year. What is wrong with this picture? Paul, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yes, thanks. And it's good every so often to think of the very long-term picture. So there's 8 billion people right now on the planet. We represent close to roughly 10% of all people that have ever lived on the planet. So I think the best number for people that have lived and died before us is about 108 billion people. And this is over 300,000 years. And because of exponential population growth, most of the vast bulk of it has been added in the last 50 to 100 years of population. Most species like ours live for hundreds of millions of years. So if we were to do that ourselves, then we're in very beginning, early times of the human experiment on the planet. Very, very big, early times, 300,000 years versus say 300 million years. There's thousands and thousands of generations of people that we could expect, in the future. So these are people that these conferences are trying to give a voice, people that haven't been born yet. But because of the acceleration of climate change, we're talking about our grandkids' survival, our children's having a decent planet to live on. I mean, climate is changing so fast and abruptly that it's, very difficult to fathom what might be coming, how bad things could get, how quickly. One of my concerns always has been, these negotiations are what humans can do. But if we continue to negotiate and not come up with solutions or strong actions, the climate emissions from the climate system will start to dwarf human emissions. And then it's basically taken out of our hands. I'm talking about, methane. There's some arguments recently that may be happening already with methane from the carbon isotope ratios. The slogans are all very well, they've got to give people hope. 1.5 alive, is a great slogan. But in order to achieve that, I think all the governments and IPCC, they'll have to move the baseline to 2000, right? Instead of being, 120 years ago, the baseline, I think they need to set a new baseline, call it 2000, And then maybe we're only at 0.65, and to stay under 1.5, we actually might accomplish that. So I'm being a bit cynical here, of course, but we got to look at the reality of the climate system, not look at rainbows and unicorns and hoping that the hard physics of the climate system changes, or some miracle occurs where we suddenly have massive carbon dioxide removal and solar radiation management and bring stuff down. I mean, for that to happen, we have to have that in the negotiations. Thanks, everybody. It's been a great session.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Paul. And extra special thanks to Julie Johnston, who we always love when you join us. So please come back again soon. You're just so inspiring to all of us. And to you, our audience, you too are inspiring. We wouldn't be able to put on a show every week if it weren't for you. You keep us going. As I've mentioned before, this is not easy work. It can be quite painful to know the facts as they are, but we want to bring those facts to you so that you can stay informed. We've published a news item on our website, and you can see the link in the description. Please check it out. We'd love to see what you think about that as well. Read the article and share with us down below. And for those of you who have not yet subscribed, please take the plunge, subscribe. We want to make sure you join us for every video. And please go ahead and like this video. It helps with the algorithm. And one thing that I always like, and I mention this, leave your comments, leave your questions, leave your thoughts. What do you think that we should do in Dubai? Us, the Climate Emergency Forum, those of us who go, what would you like to see from us when we're there? What would you like to hear back from us? Would love to hear your perspective. And looking forward to seeing you next time at the Climate Emergency Forum.